Welcome to the High Level Wife Podcast. This is a space for Christian wives who love God, want their marriage healed, and are done performing, fixing, striving, or trying to control their way to change. Here we're going to talk about marriage God's way through right order, surrender, heart posture, and spirit-led transformation. This is not self-help, it's discipleship. My name is Chelsey Holm, and my role is to help you move from awareness into obedience so real healing, wholeness, and restoration can take root. Let's begin. We're back. If you've ever wondered why the serpent approached Eve first in the Garden of Eden, you're not alone. And I know people like to throw shade on her, but there's reasons for this. For many people, the story has been misunderstood for generations. Just this week, I heard someone, or I read a comment about well, Eve, was the one who fell and blah, 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 blah. But what some people assume is it means that women are weaker spiritually, while others assume it means women are more easily deceived. But when you really look at the story in Genesis, something else becomes very clear. Satan targeted Eve first because of her influence. Welcome back to the High Level Wife Podcast. I'm Chelsey Holm, and we are continuing our mini-series, The Influence of a Wife in God's Design. In the first episode, we talked about how a wife's obedience is not private. It shapes the spiritual atmosphere of her home. And then in the last episode, we talked about the difference between influence and control and how many wives unintentionally cross that line. And so today we're going to go back to the very beginning, to the Garden of Eden, because the story reveals something profound about the influence God designed women to carry. So when we look at Genesis 3, it begins with a simple but powerful moment. The serpent approaches Eve and says, "Did God really say?" He doesn't go to Adam first, he goes to Eve. And for years, people have debated why. But when you step back and you look at how marriage works, the answer becomes clearer. Because influence flows through relationship, and the enemy knew that if he could distort Eve's understanding of God, that influence would reach Adam. Right? Like men want to please us as women. That's why it's so easy for us to damage them and push them away when we work from control instead of influence. So think about the sequence of events that happened. Eve eats the fruit, right, which started with questioning, right? She questioned God's intent. She questioned God's heart behind what he had said, right? She allowed the word to be twisted. So then she eats the fruit. Then she gives some to her husband who was with her, and he eats. Her decision influenced his. Okay, that does not remove Adam's responsibility. Adam was accountable for his own choice because we see that when God shows up and says, "Adam, what have you done?" Right? He addresses Adam first. So Adam was accountable for his own choice and also for the choice of his wife because he was responsible for her. But the story shows us something important here, and it shows that influence flows both directions in marriage. Husbands influence wives, and wives influence husbands, and the enemy understands that. The enemy understands that. You guys have to understand, the biggest trick the devil ever played was convincing people that he doesn't exist, right? He is very real and he is very intentional. And his sole mission is to destroy God's children because we are the creation, the pinnacle of God's creation, and he hates us for it because he wants to be the pinnacle of creation. And not only that, he wants to be worshiped by the pinnacle of creation, and that's not going to happen, right? Okay, so the reason this matters for wives today is because your influence is real. Whether you realize it or not, the way you respond to things spiritually affects your husband. Your faith affects him. Your fears affect him. And your peace affects him. Your resentment, affects him. Whether it's stated or unstated, it still affects him. The posture of your heart becomes part of the environment that he lives in. We dove into that last week, right? And the week before. The same is true for him toward you. Marriage is a spiritual ecosystem, and what one person brings into it affects the other. this is this is one part where I think people misunderstand the story because what they think is that influence means weakness. You know, that Satan approached Eve first because she was weaker. But influence is actually power, right? Look at social media. You go on social media and it tells you what you didn't know you needed and now you need it, right? Like this is the power of influence. And in the world of social media, you don't even have to know, like, or trust somebody, really, right? In order to make a decision that was influenced. So it's not power in the sense of authority or control, but it's power in the sense of impact. A wife's presence in a home changes things. Think about this. Think about your tone. It changes things. Think about your words. They change things. Think about your spirit. Changes things. And when that influence is aligned with God, it brings life. But when it's aligned with fear, resentment, or control, it brings tension and nobody wants to be around you. You don't even want to be around you, right? The enemy's strategy has always been the same. It's to distort the truth, to create confusion, and then allow influence to spread that confusion. That's exactly what we saw that happened in the garden. But here's the beautiful part of the gospel is that God redeems what was broken, and that very influence that once helped bring the fall can now be used to build life, faith, and restoration. You need to understand also that God chose us before the foundation of the world. And so truth is everlasting. Clarity and order are from the Lord. God had a plan, an arc of redemption before this even happened. How beautiful is that? Right? He knew what was going to happen. And he created us anyways because he loves us. When a wife walks closely with God, it shapes the atmosphere of her home. My husband called. So that was that awkward pause there. Okay. So when she trusts the Lord, that trust becomes contagious. And when she chooses humility instead of pride, right? Because it is a choice. It changes conversations. It changes the heart posture. When she responds with peace instead of panic, it shifts the emotional climate of the home, and that influence is subtle, but it is powerful. We always have to return back to God's original design. And God did not design women to be passive, He designed them to be life givers. Genesis describes Eve as the mother of all living, and that's not just biological, it reflects something deeper. Women bring life into environments, emotionally, relationally, spiritually, and that's why your influence matters so much. Think about it. I always use the example because I think we've all had this experience of if you walk into a man's dwelling where there is no woman present, you can notice it right away because there's probably not stuff on the walls. There's no life in the space. It's just very functional, cut and dry, right? But now that man has a wife and she makes the house a home, right? Because women were meant to bring life into environments. And again, that's why your influence matters so much. So here's the question to consider today. What kind of influence are you carrying in your marriage? Is your spiritual posture bringing peace into your home or tension? Is your trust in God creating stability, or is fear actually shaping the environment? Because whether we realize it or not, our influence is always working. We are constantly being formed. We're undergoing a formation process. It's just most of the time that formation is unintentional. And the same is true with our influence, that It is constantly shaping, but most of the time it's not intentional. We want it to be intentional. And so we need to realize that our influence is always working. In the next episode of the series, we're going to talk about something that's very practical, right? We always want to take the what's the word? The principle, and we want to make it practical. We're going to talk about the atmosphere of your home because the spirit a wife carries often sets the tone for the entire household. And remember, a wife's influence was very powerful, right? In the beginning. It was powerful enough to shape the very first marriage. And today, that same influence still has the power to shape your home. If this episode stirred something in you, but high level wife feels like too big of a step right now, I want you to hear this clearly. You don't have to jump ahead to honor what God is doing. I created a short guided experience called From Awareness to Surrender for women who aren't ready for ongoing support but know they can't stay where they are. It includes 3 short teachings, a guided exercise, and a prayer I recorded over you. It's going to help you move from awareness into real response. You'll find a link in the show notes. And if you're not ready even for that, don't rush past this moment. Sit with God and ask Him what obedience looks like next.